Bernie Sanders has a beef with Chipotle. No, not the taste of the burritos or the ingredients, but it has to do with profit gouging. The fast food chain recently reported its fourth quarter numbers, and last year its total revenue increased 22% to $2 billion. Good for the company. However, it's not because of a record number of customers, it's because Chipotle was jacking up the prices and holding some costs down. Bernie Sanders just tweeted, corporate greed is Chipotle increasing its profits by 181% last year to $764 million, giving its CEO a 137% pay raise to $38 million in 2020, and blaming the rising cost of a burrito on a minimum wage worker who got a 50-cent pay raise. That's not inflation, that is price gouging. And the evidence of price gouging actually does seem pretty compelling when you look at some of what has been reported on this. CEO Brian Niccol made $38 million in 2020. Niccol's compensation was 2,898 times more than the median Chipotle's worker, $13,127 salary in 2020, based on an employee working 25 hours a week in Illinois. When the fourth quarter earnings report was released, Niccol said in an accompanying statement that 2021 was an outstanding year for Chipotle, highlighting the strength and resilience of our brand. Niccol, though, was not commenting or responding to Bernie Sanders' criticism or the main allegation that Chipotle took advantage of inflation, took advantage of the pandemic to make prices rise a lot faster than inflation was rising. Cenk, your thoughts?
Yeah, so first of all, Bernie's making a terrific point about who's actually responsible for rising prices. Second of all, I want to make clear, as I always do, look, there's nothing wrong with a company getting bigger. There's nothing wrong with a company making a lot of profits. The CEO to wager, median wage is an issue. But overall, if your company's doing great and you want to pay your CEO a lot of money, no problem. Okay, so where do we draw the line? We draw the line when you say, "Oh, we had to raise the price of the burrito," and it's the workers' fault. They're making too much when their median wages, as we just showed you, is a little over $13,000 a year. Okay, but the guy making $38 million a year is not making too much. And he's not contributing to inflation, and golly gee, there was nothing they could do. No, wait a minute. Okay, you got $2 billion in revenue, but you could have $2 billion in revenue and lose money. And then I say, okay, well, they're struggling and they don't have the margins. I understand it, I'm a business person, right? But wait a minute, you made $764 million in profits last year, and then you bragged about it. So don't come around telling us that the wages of the average guy is too high, and that's why you had to raise prices. No, that's deeply insulting. It's deeply wrong, like factually incorrect. And look, Bernie happened to pick Chipotle, but funny enough, I have no beef with Chipotle. It's a trend, and I'm not letting them off the hook either. It's a trend that they're all doing. And when we showed this to you weeks and months ago, all the news anchors, or as I call them, the news actors on cable came out, inflation, the prices are too high. We showed you a number of clips, including from MSNBC, where anchors would tell you wages are too high. That's why inflation is going up, and it's this endangers their beloved stock market, et cetera. So let me give you more examples. McDonald's last year they had $23 billion in revenue, but again, revenue means you're a giant company. But did you actually make a profit? Yeah, only $7.5 billion in profit last year, and their profits went up 59%. That's a monster number in any context. So don't tell us that you had to increase the prices and that it's the workers' fault. That's insane.
And it's not just McDonald's, it's not just Chipotle. A group, which is a watchdog group called Food and Water Watch, they pointed out that over the last 2 years since the pandemic, the consumer price index has gone up 8.5%. However, energy costs have increased by 20%. The cost to feed a family of 4 on a thrifty food plan has increased by 33.5%. So what's going on here? Well, let's look at some individual products. Gasoline over the last 2 years, up 31%, beef up 19%, pork up 31%, poultry up nearly 20%, milk up 17%, eggs 16.5%. Why is it that prices are going up so much faster than the 8% of the CPI? Well, that's because these companies are raising prices. It doesn't have anything to do with the supply chain. It doesn't have anything to do with inflation. They are taking advantage of this opportunity. And oh, by the way, their revenue is skyrocketing. Meat and chicken producers, Tyson's Foods, over the last 2 years, their revenue has gone up 11%. Purdue up 12.7%. Cargill up 17.3%. And how about the grocery stores? That there are 4 of them that own 70% of all the grocery stores across the United States. Walmart up 6.7% compared to fiscal year 2019. Kroger up 8.4%. Costco, their revenue has gone up 28.3% over the last 2 years compared to pre-pandemic levels. Albertsons up 11.6%. So clearly there are a lot of companies in the food sector and the energy sector which are taking advantage of people's troubles and using the excuse of inflation and supply chain issues, whatever those are, and saying, oh, we have to raise prices. And they're making record profits.
Yeah, so guys, there's a couple of layers to this. There is the politicians who work basically for these giant corporations. And so the Mansions and all the Republicans will come out and say, oh my God, golly gee, inflation, that's why we can't do Build Back Better. That would actually help you guys. It would give unpaid family leave, which hurts corporations, bottom line, child tax credit. So they don't want you to get any of those things. They already took all the money, et cetera. And then they'll say, oh, it's because of inflation. There was nothing we could do. And the more that they raise prices on goods like food and the stuff that you buy at grocery stores, even if it isn't food, that hits your bottom line so dramatically, especially with those giant increases that we just showed you, that you have a normal reaction to like, oh my God, they must be right about inflation. And then that lets them then pass policies that help those same corporations who are profit gouging from you in the first place. And then of course, the way that you could possibly stop that cycle is if you had an honest media that said, wait a minute guys, that doesn't, look, inflation is about supply chain issues, it's about the Federal Reserve that did quantitative easing, put too much money in the money supply, and look at their profits versus inflation, et cetera. In fact, do what we're doing. But we don't have, generally speaking, an honest mainstream media. They usually do marketing on behalf of corporate rule. So instead, they also pile on and say, oh, inflation, oh, you see how much your burrito went up? You see how much your quarter pounder went up? No, we can't do any more for the American people. We're tapped out, so you're not gonna get any more bills because the corporations already got all their bills. They already got trillions of dollars from the Federal Reserve in loans and other goodies, and they already got the infrastructure bill that was all corporate pork. So they all use it to their political advantage. And I'm gonna give you one last one here, guys, because it isn't just about the food industry. ExxonMobil made $8.9 billion profit in just the last quarter of the last year. In just 1 quarter of a year, they made $9 billion in profit. And what happened legislatively? Manchin killed any provision that would have hurt the fossil fuel industry in any way. In fact, they still get their goodies, and we passed no climate change legislation that would help renewable energies. So on top of all the profits they're making, Manchin and the Republicans, corporate Democrats and corporate Republicans, use fear about inflation to make sure you don't get anything more and that the workers are blamed. Meanwhile, they're shoveling money over to giant corporations who are already the most profitable companies in the world. So that's how this game gets rigged and the average worker in America gets screwed. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.